So what I want to do is go into a little bit of the math first, and then we'll jump back to a video actually for a little while as well. I'm trying to find the best way to do this distance learning, and I find that like writing only is going to get boring right away, so I'm trying to like mix it up a little bit. So really what we're focusing on is 10.5 right here. And then we'll get into 10.6, 10.7, and 10.8 kind of as one topic because they're very much related to each other. So the beginning of 10.5 tells us that I, the moment of inertia, if you recall from 10.4, was really the summation of m sub I times r sub I squared. And this was from 10.4 when we looked at the rotational kinetic energy. And we said that rotational kinetic energy was 1/2 I omega squared. This was how that formula was analogous to kinetic energy from translational kinetic energy. So this is the definition of I, but this is only good when we have all particles. So if I've got a rod and there's particles some places along the way, and that's rotating about the axis, which is, say, my hand, then as a result, what will happen is those particles themselves will be like the mass concentrations in those locations. But if I have just simply a rod without masses along the way, then the mass of the rod is like a continuum. Its mass is distributed throughout the entire length. By the way, can you guys see me as well? Do you all know how to split the screen when it's screen sharing? Because if you don't know how to, there's a way to do it. So make sure you can see what I'm doing with my hands also. That's why I'm trying to be a little animated here. Okay. So that's the general formula that we start with when it's particles. But when it's not particles, the formula for I becomes an integral. And we integrate r squared dm. R squared dm. Now, r squared, again here, is r is the distance from the rotating axis, and that's the same, it hasn't changed at all, right, from here to here. But when the mass is concentrated, we can literally find the I value by adding together all of those masses from the center. But when the mass is not concentrated at one location or several locations, yet it's distributed, we have to look at the mass, and we have to look at little infinitesimally small parts of the mass, dm's, little pieces of it, kind of like dx and dy like you've seen. Now, what I'd like to do is just go through a couple different shapes so you guys can get an idea of the shapes and what they look like as far as their I values, and then we'll derive a couple of different examples. So I'm going to go to the next slide to show this, so give me a moment. And I'm going to take a quick picture of this so you guys can see it. So I'm on page 274, what I'm talking about right now. Let me just quickly crop this, guys. Hang on. Okay, perfect. So what we're noticing, say again? It's the integral of r squared dm, where r is the distance from the rotating axis, and dm is a small piece of the mass along the object. So these formulas here we're looking at are for different objects in different scenarios. So the first one that we're looking at there is the hoop about a central axis. So we're looking at something that doesn't really have much length to it. Notice there's no L value. Whereas if you look at the one directly below it, the solid cylinder, let me point so you guys can see this. The solid cylinder, the length matters, and it's rotating around this axis now. It's not rotating around that axis. So notice when it's rotating around this axis, let's see, this is the axis right here. These are the exact same shapes. When it's rotating around this axis, the length doesn't affect it at all. It's just the R value because the mass is distributed at some distance from the rotated axis. The length is not affecting that though. While in this case, the length and the radius both matter because the further away in length, the further it is from that axis as well. Again, this axis is up and down. So the axis location is probably the most important thing that we're going to be focused on, the location of the axis itself. Now, what you'll notice is some of them are fractions with mr squared and ml squared. Some are just ml squared, like a really, really thin rod where the radius is negligible. Like look at these two. They look identical, right? But this is a really thin rod where the R value is so small that it doesn't matter. So this becomes such a small number that when you go to use your formula here, this becomes practically 0, which is what's giving you this right here. So you're just dropping this piece off to give you the 1/12 ml squared for the second one here. Now again here, because it's rotating around this axis, the length does not affect it because it's how far the distance from the rotating axis is, which is the radius. This one has to do with a ring that has some thickness to it, right? This is a hoop, and this is what they call an annular cylinder, a ring. So these are identical, really, when you look at them, but this one is not very thick. It doesn't have a wall thickness to it. So this is a very slender hoop, like a hula hoop almost. Whereas this one is more like a washer, okay, a washer spinning around something and has some thickness to it. Now, notice again the formulas differ slightly. After these 5 or so, we get into spherical objects. So we first have a solid sphere, 2/5 mr squared, and then notice, look, a thin spherical shell, 2/3 mr squared. Why is this one a larger value than this one was over here? What's the rationale behind that? And think about what I is really a measurement of, what we said, how I changes. What do you think? Yeah, the mass is concentrated further away when it's a shell. Imagine this being hollow, right? So if the mass is all pretty much on the outside here, then you're going to have a larger R value. And if we think about our formula for I is I equals R squared dm. So the R value being greater because the mass is all concentrated on the outside is what yields a larger I value for a hollow sphere versus a solid sphere in the other scenario. So if we look at this next one here, we've got a hoop about a diameter. So this looks identical to this one, right? If we look at these two, but the major difference here is that this is rotating about a different axis now. Right? Look at this axis versus this axis, and it clearly changes our result. We have half the rotational inertia than we did earlier because a lot of this mass is very close to the axis. Like, look, I'm thinking about this object as a bunch of little masses put together. See all the dots I'm kind of making here? Okay, all of these masses that are really close to the axis don't contribute much because their R value is so small. So when this thing is rotating, the mass right here is not having much of an effect on I. But the mass here is having a large effect on the I value. So because some of the mass is close and only part of it is a further distance away, this number is going to be less than this one, where in this case, all of the mass is a far distance away. None of the mass is concentrated around the axis. So these two compared to each other, we can see why this one is greater than this one is. And then finally, the last one is a slab. And this is a slab of a piece of a solid here, okay, with a dimension A and B here. And that's just the derived formula for it. So now what I want to do is I want to pause and go over a quick derivation of this before we get into what's called the parallel axis theorem, which is on the bottom of page 274. That's kind of what we're going to go to next. Matt, go ahead. So that's a good question, Matt. So the only time an L value is going to play a role is when we have an additional parameter, not just the radius. So if you look at this, the radius from the center outward is the same no matter where I look at it, right? This is the radius. I keep pointing to all these. So there is no length in this case. If this had some, say you extruded it into the third dimension, if this hoop went in this direction like that, Matt, then you would be in a scenario very much like this one right here, where this has a radius, so we know that the mass is separated from the axis slightly because it's a further distance away. But then, look, here's the axis. Some of the mass is at the very end. So the length of this one matters because it's a distance away from the axis where it's rotating, whereas this one isn't in that case. So it's when you have a second dimension of your mass concentration that pulls it either further away or closer to that rotating axis. Sorry, I'm laughing at Londell's background. Matt, does that make sense? Does that make sense why in this case it doesn't have it? Because we don't have a length to the hoop. The hoop is just one value. So what you're visualizing, Matt, is this hoop, or really this cylinder, if it were pretty much hollowed out. If this cylinder were hollowed out, it would be this hoop right here, right? With a dimension in this direction. And then L would be included in the formula here at the bottom. Okay, the good part about the exam is that a lot of these you're going to utilize and not have to derive, but you have to kind of still understand why some are different than others, okay? And that's why I did that little, I showed that little video of the things rolling down the ramp so you can see that concentration idea of the mass being on the outside. Okay, I'm going to stop screen. So the parallel axis theorem, we're going to finish with this idea real quick. I know we have a couple minutes left. The parallel axis theorem is the idea that what if we're not rotating about the center of mass? How does it work is the question. And that we can prove with the one that we started with a moment ago where we rotated about the end of the rod. And the idea behind this is that the rotational inertia is going to be the same as the rotational inertia around the center of mass plus mh squared. Now, here's the key. Here's the rod. Let's draw this rod here. And let's assume we know the rotational inertia about the center of mass, which is right there. And the rotational inertia about the center of mass of a rod, we just said, was 1/12 ml squared. So that value is given. So we can go ahead and write that as 1/12 ml squared. But then what we have to do is we have to think about how far is the new axis that we're going to rotate about. So let's say we're rotating about the end of this rod instead of the center. Put the axis of rotation here now. This is defined as h, the distance between the parallel axes. So this one is a distance of L over 2 away. So this becomes m times L over 2. Remember, the length of the rod is L. That's L up there. So it becomes m times L over 2 squared. And then if I simplify this, I'm going to get L squared over 4. And L squared over 4 in terms of 12 is going to be 3L squared over 12. And then we have here, if we look at this, we'll have 1/12 and 3/12, so give us 4/12 ml squared, which is really ml squared over 3. And that's what we derived a little while ago in the first part, or what the author derived, I should say, in the first part of that last video. So the parallel axis theorem, is introduced in your text in this section, in section 10.5. So it would be useful to look at that. Now, I like the way the author describes the parallel axis theorem and goes through a whole derivation of it at the end of this video. So what I'll do is this. I'm going to put a link to the video that we just had up a moment ago, and he's going to do some other derivations, and then I'll skip ahead to the parallel axis theorem. So what you guys should do is you should watch, like, it's about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of that video. And then over break, please look to see if I assign an Edpuzzle video or two. Okay, I might just assign a couple just as just a means of review for the AP exam so that you guys could watch some older stuff like kinematics from earlier this year and just get an idea of how it's going. I'm going to try to use the Flippin' Physics channel because that author, I think, does a really good job of describing what you need to know for the exam specifically, and does a good job of interacting with those fake students he creates so you kind of see what other students would think as they're going through it. Okay, it was a lot we took on today. This is not an easy topic, okay? This is 10.5 of our textbook. We are going to look at 10, and we really did look at 10.6 because it was torque, but we'll look at 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, and we'll do some more example problems of this in our next meeting. So plan on our next meeting being in class, but if it's not, it'll be on the Tuesday after break, and we'll do that virtually again, and we'll do probably more examples this time of 10.6 through 10.8. Okay, I'll probably assign you a couple of problems for homework for 10.5. I haven't looked at it yet for homeworks, but I'll try to give you an idea of that. You guys all have class to go to. Sorry, I know. Let me know if you have any questions. If you hang around and ask me some questions, you can hang around on the video. I won't leave until everybody else does. If I don't see you guys, have a good break for 2 weeks, and I will see you obviously when you get back. You're welcome, guys.